All right, GCSE Business Studies superstars, welcome back for Lesson 3.
Lesson 3.
In our finance unit deep dive,
Yes.
we've already tackled key financial terms
Yes, we have.
and different sources of finance, but
Right.
today is all about the heartbeat of any business cash flow.
It's a concept that trips up a lot of people, even seasoned business owners.
I bet. It's one thing to have a profitable business on paper, but if the cash isn't flowing,
Yes.
it's like having a car without fuel. You're not going anywhere.
Exactly. You can have the best product in the world, a team of rock star employees and customers lining up at the door.
Yeah.
But if you can't pay your bills, it's game over.
Makes you wonder how many businesses have amazing ideas,
Oh, yeah.
but stumble because they haven't mastered this cash flow thing.
More than you'd think. Which is why we're diving into it today using our favorite fictional business, BrewBliss, as a case study.
Our little independent coffee shop is gearing up for the festive season, which,
Oh.
as we all know, can be a roller coaster for businesses.
They've stocked up on festive blends, hired extra help, and even landed some big catering gigs.
Nice.
On the surface, it looks like they're set for a banner holiday season, but
There's always a but, isn't there?
always. See, while BrewBliss's sales are projected to skyrocket, the timing of those payments is a bit wonky.
Okay.
Those big catering contracts.
Yeah.
The money doesn't come in for 60 days.
Oh.
Meanwhile, they've got rent wages and supplier invoices piling up
Yeah.
that need to be paid immediately.
Oh, no. So they're going to have all this money coming in eventually, but might not have enough on hand to cover their costs in the short term.
Bingo. That's what we call a cash flow gap.
Mm.
And it can be a real nightmare for businesses, especially during busy periods like the holidays.
I can already feel the stress for our BrewBliss owners. Imagine seeing your business booming, customers loving your product,
I know.
but then not being able to make payroll because the cash just isn't there yet.
It's a surprisingly common problem. And that's why understanding cash flow is so crucial. It's not just about how much profit you make. It's about the timing of when money comes in and goes out.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal, but how can businesses predict these potential cash crunches?
Right.
Is there a crystal ball for finances?
It's not quite a crystal ball, but we have something just as valuable.
Okay.
Cash flow forecasts. Think of it like a weather forecast for your business's finances.
Ooh.
It helps you predict periods of potential cash shortages or surpluses so you can prepare accordingly.
So instead of being caught off guard by a financial storm, you can batten down the hatches and weather it out.
Exactly. And just like a weather forecast shows you the expected temperature and precipitation, a cash flow forecast outlines your anticipated cash inflows and outflows.
Okay, so cash inflows are the good stuff, all the money coming into the business.
Right.
That's sales, revenue, loans, investments, right?
Right. Then you've got the cash outflows, which is the money going out.
Okay.
Think rent, wages, utilities, supplies, all the things that keep the business running.
And I'm guessing the difference between those two is what really matters.
You got it. That's what we call net cash flow. If your inflows are higher than your outflows, you're in good shape. More cash is coming in than going out.
Makes sense.
But if your outflows are higher...
Then you've got a potential problem on your hands.
Exactly. Let's dive into BrewBliss's numbers and see how this plays out in a real-world scenario. They've actually put together a cash flow forecast, which is a great first step.
All right, let's take a peek at their financial future.
In October, they're projecting 8,000 pounds in inflows, but whopping 10,000 pounds in outflows.
Okay.
That leaves them with a net cash flow of...
Let me do the math. Negative 2,000 pounds.
Yeah,
Not a great start, but hopefully they have some cash reserves to cushion the blow.
they do. They're starting October with 6,000 pounds in the bank.
All right.
But after factoring in that negative cash flow, their closing balance for the month drops down to 4,000 pounds.
Okay, still in positive territory, but those margins are getting pretty thin. What about November? Isn't that when those big catering contracts start to kick in?
They do, but here's where it gets interesting. Their inflows do jump up to 10,000 pounds,
Okay.
but their outflows skyrocket to 15,000 pounds.
Yikes. They're spending more than they're bringing in, even with those big catering orders.
Exactly, and that leaves them with a net cash flow of negative 5,000 pounds for November.
Wait, so if they're starting November with 4,000 pounds and they have a negative cash flow of 5,000 pounds, that means their closing balance would be...
Negative 1,000 pounds, they're dipping into the red.
Oh, no. So even though they've got all these great sales coming in, eventually they might not have enough cash on hand to cover their costs in November. What does this mean for BrewBliss? Are they doomed?
Not necessarily. There are definitely strategies they can use to navigate this cash flow challenge,
Okay.
but we'll dive into those right after.
Wait, hold that thought. Don't leave us hanging.
Yeah.
What are the real-world implications of this negative cash flow? What's actually at stake for BrewBliss?
Well, for starters, they might not be able to pay their suppliers on time. That could damage their relationships and make it harder to get the supplies they need in the future.
And I bet their employees wouldn't be too thrilled about delayed paychecks, especially right before the holidays.
Exactly. Staff morale would plummet, and they might even lose some of their best employees.
Plus, with such a tight cash flow, what happens if something unexpected pops up?
Yeah.
Like a broken coffee machine or a sudden surge in demand for peppermint mochas?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like they're walking a financial tightrope.
They are, but don't worry, we're not going to leave BrewBliss hanging. In part 2, we'll explore some solutions they can use to turn this cash flow situation around and sail smoothly into the new year.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to hear how they can navigate this financial storm and keep those lattes flowing.
All right.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
All right, so we left BrewBliss teetering on the edge of a cash flow cliffhanger.
Yeah.
They're projected to be in the red come November, which is definitely not the kind of holiday cheer they were hoping for.
It's a tough spot to be in, but thankfully it's not an insurmountable challenge.
Okay, good.
There are actually a few things they can do to boost their cash flow and avoid a financial meltdown. It's like having a toolbox full of options.
Okay.
But you need to know which tool to use for the right job.
I love a good tool analogy. So what's in this cash flow toolbox? What kind of strategies can BrewBliss use to turn things around?
Well, they can tackle it from two angles,
Okay.
increasing their cash inflows and decreasing their cash outflows.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about boosting those inflows. Yeah. How do we get more cash flowing into the business?
One option is to incentivize early payments. Think about those festive gift sets that everyone loves.
Oh, yeah.
BrewBliss could offer a discount to customers who pre-ordered those sets before a certain date.
That's a smart move.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does it lock in those sales, but it also brings in a chunk of cash up front, which is exactly what they need right now.
Right. It's like giving their cash flow a little holiday bonus.
I like that.
And speaking of gifts, there's another classic strategy, gift cards.
Oh, yeah. Gift cards are basically like little interest-free loans from your customers. They get the perfect gift, and BrewBliss gets an instant cash injection.
Exactly. It's a win-win for everyone. And while we're on the topic of bringing cash sooner rather than later, they could also try negotiating with their catering clients.
I'm all ears. How do we get those big catering payments to come in a little faster?
They could offer a small discount, maybe 5%, for clients who agree to pay their invoices within 30 days instead of the standard 60 days.
Okay.
It might mean slightly lower profits on those contracts, but the improved cash flow could be a lifesaver in the short term.
I see your point. It's a trade-off, but sometimes a little compromise can make a big difference. Okay, so we've talked about ways to boost those inflows. What about reducing outflows? Are there any expenses that BrewBliss can trim or delay?
Absolutely. Remember that furniture upgrade they were planning?
The one with the comfy new armchairs, I love those.
Yeah, those would have been nice.
Yeah.
But it's probably a wise move to postpone that expense until after the holidays. Non-essential spending can wait when cash flow is tight.
Good point. It's all about prioritizing needs versus wants. What else can they do?
Well, they could also try negotiating with their suppliers. Instead of having to pay those invoices immediately, they could see if their suppliers are willing to extend their payment terms to 30 days.
But wouldn't that put a strain on their supplier's cash flow? It seems a bit unfair to pass the buck, doesn't it?
It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
They need to be respectful of their suppliers' needs as well.
Yeah, of course.
But sometimes a simple conversation and a bit of flexibility on both sides can go a long way.
Makes sense. It's all about building strong relationships and working together to find solutions. So we've talked about boosting inflows and reducing outflows. Is there anything else in that financial toolbox? Any secret weapons?
We do have one more option,
Okay.
but it's not a decision to be taken lightly short-term financing.
Like a financial lifeline. Remember back in episode 2 when we talked about different sources of finance?
Yes,
Is that what you're referring to?
precisely. In this case, BrewBliss could consider arranging an overdraft with their bank.
Okay, so an overdraft is basically a short-term loan. Lets you spend more money than you have in your account, right?
You got it. It acts as a safety net, providing access to extra funds when they're needed most. Let's say BrewBliss secured a £3,000 overdraft. That would give them a buffer to cover any shortfalls during November.
So even if they don't need the full £3,000, just knowing it's there would provide some peace of mind. But isn't an overdraft just kicking the can down the road? What happens when they have to repay it?
That's a valid concern. Overdrafts do come with interest charges, so it's not a solution to be used lightly or for the long term. But in a situation like this,
Right.
where there's a temporary cash flow gap,
Yeah.
But a clear path to profitability, a small overdraft, can be a strategic tool.
Okay, let's see how this all hits together. So we've got options for boosting inflows, trimming outflows, and even securing a bit of short-term financing if needed. But how does this actually translate into real numbers? Let's
Yeah.
see how these strategies impact their cash flow forecast.
All right, let's revisit their original forecast for November. Remember, they were projected to have a negative closing balance of £1,000.
Yeah, not a pretty picture. But hopefully these strategies can paint a brighter financial future for BrewBliss.
Let's see, with the pre-orders, gift cards, and expedited catering payments, the projected inflows for November now jump up to £12,000.
That's a significant boost. And what about their outflows? Did they manage to cut back on those as well?
They did. By postponing the furniture upgrade and negotiating with some of their suppliers, they've managed to bring their projected outflows down to £13,000.
Okay, so they're still spending more than they're bringing in,
Right.
but that gap has narrowed considerably.
Exactly. Their net cash flow for November is now only negative £1,000.
Okay.
And since they're starting the month with £4,000.
That means their projected closing balance for November is, drumroll please, £3,000. They're back in the black.
They are. And even though they're still using a small portion of their overdraft, it's good to know that safety net is there if they need it.
This is a much happier ending than I was expecting. It's amazing how a few strategic moves can make such a big difference. They've gone from facing a potential crisis to having a manageable situation.
It really highlights the power of understanding and proactively managing your cash flow. BrewBliss could have easily panicked and made rash decisions when they saw that initial negative forecast, but they took a step back,
Yeah.
explored their options, and came up with a solid plan.
It's a great lesson for any business owner, really.
Yeah.
Cash flow is king. But it's not just about crunching numbers and staring at spreadsheets. It's about understanding the dynamics of your business, building strong relationships, and being adaptable in the face of challenges.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenges, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the bigger picture here. What can we learn from BrewBliss's experience that applies to other businesses, maybe even our own personal finances?
Ooh, I like where this is going. It's time to connect the dots and see how these concepts play out in the real world. So BrewBliss has dodged a bullet and is on track for a much smoother festive season. It's a good reminder that even when things look a bit scary on paper,
Yeah.
there are often ways to navigate those challenges and come out stronger on the other side.
What's fascinating to me is that BrewBliss's story isn't unique. Countless businesses face cash flow challenges, especially during periods of growth or seasonal fluctuations. A classic example is Toys R Us.
Wait, Toys R Us, the toy giant,
Yes,
they had cash flow problems.
they did. Despite strong sales, particularly during the holiday season, they struggled with managing their debt and inventory, which ultimately led to a cash crunch and, sadly, their demise.
Wow, that's a sobering reminder that even big established companies aren't immune to cash flow problems.
Yes.
It really underscores the importance of understanding these concepts no matter what size business you're running.
It's a lesson that applies to our personal finances as well.
Oh, really?
Think about it. We all have inflows and outflows in our lives.
Yeah. Our income is our inflow, and our expenses are our outflows.
So if we're spending more than we're earning, we're essentially experiencing a personal cash flow gap.
Exactly.
That's when those credit card bills start piling up, and we might find ourselves struggling to make ends meet.
Exactly. And just like businesses can use cash flow forecasts to predict and manage their finances, we can create personal budgets to track our income and expenses and make sure we're staying on track.
It's all about being mindful of where our money is going and making sure we're not living beyond our means.
Right. And if we do find ourselves facing a temporary cash shortfall, we can explore options like reducing our spending, picking up a side hustle to boost our income, or even negotiating with creditors to adjust payment terms.
Okay.
The same principles that apply to businesses can often be applied to our personal lives as well.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. Cash flow isn't just a business concept, it's a life skill. So what are the key takeaways we want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
First and foremost, cash flow and profit are not the same thing.
A business can be profitable on paper but still struggle with cash flow issues if the timing of those inflows and outflows isn't aligned.
It's like having a delicious cake but not having an oven to bake it in. You need both ingredients and the right equipment to achieve the desired outcome.
That's a great analogy. And that's why cash flow forecasts are so crucial. They're like financial GPS systems helping businesses anticipate potential roadblocks and navigate their way to success.
And even if a business does hit a cash flow bump, it's not the end of the world. There are often solutions available from optimizing payment terms to exploring short-term financing options.
The key is to be proactive, adaptable, and always looking for ways to improve your financial situation.
All right, GCSE Business Studies champs, that wraps up Lesson 3 in our Finance Unit Deep Dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding the difference between cash and profit to exploring the power of cash flow forecasts and brainstorming practical solutions for our friends at BrewBliss.
You've now got a solid foundation in cash flow management, a concept that's essential for success in the business world and beyond. Keep exploring these ideas, apply them to real-world scenarios, and never stop learning.
As always, a huge shout out to Google LM Notebook for the excellent audio using AI. This has been a PLC Strategy Podcast production. Until next time, keep those entrepreneurial minds engaged and those cash flows positive.